Good evening, everyone. Welcome. I'm Craig Snyder, the president of the World Affairs Council of Philadelphia. I start, as always, in the modern world. Please take a moment, if you haven't already done it, to silence your cell phones and electronic devices. But that being said, we always encourage you to engage on our social media platforms. Please feel free to tweet during tonight's event using our Twitter handle @WACPhila. And we ask anyone who hasn't already liked the council on Facebook to please do so. We have a full lineup of very exciting programs this spring. Just 2 days from now, we're hosting Google's Senior Vice President of People Operations, Laszlo Bach, at Villanova University's Conference Center for a luncheon. Next week, April 15th, we are welcoming former Treasury Secretary Hank Paulson, who will be focusing on U.S.-China economic relations. We have just confirmed, if you haven't been to the website recently, we've just confirmed a program on U.S.-Israeli relations, obviously a topic of vast change at the moment for the morning of April 21st. And then next month, the beginning of next month, May 7th, we have former White House press secretary and Fox News personality Dana Perino, who will be joining us. Turning quickly to our travel program, with Iran very much in the news, and the stories I'm sure you all saw of Iranians celebrating the nuclear arms framework in the streets of Tehran. Our timing is excellent in the 2 tour groups that we have about to leave for Iran, if anyone is interested in joining. I led one of those trips last year, and it was a monumental life experience to go there. We're now taking reservations for our October study tour in Iran right now. Also, literally as of today, the Council's mobile app was updated to include special travel discounts for those of you who download the app, so I'd encourage you to do that as well. Lots to look forward to, and we hope that you'll join us for these events. Events like tonight's, along with your support, enable the Council to offer its most important programs to a diverse group of over 2,100 middle and high school students in 80 schools throughout the Philadelphia area. We foster skills and sensibilities that we all know they need in order to thrive and compete in a knowledge-based global community. I'd like to thank the Global Interdependence Center, organization that has been cooperating with us to promote tonight's event, obviously to great success. And as a reminder to everyone, the second part of tonight's event, an AJ Raju Millennial program featuring a truly impressive panel of regional women leaders in business, will start at 7:30, following a short change on the stage here, so please be sure to stick around. Finally, most importantly, I would like to thank our partner for tonight's event, St. Joseph's University Hobbs School of Business, for their generous sponsorship. With that, I'd like to welcome Dr. Joseph D'Angelo, the Dean of the Hobbs School of Business of St. Joseph's, and a board member of the World Affairs Council, who will introduce Arianna Huffington. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. I'm pleased that St. Joseph University Hobbs School of Business is sponsoring tonight's event, and that we are partnering with the World Affairs Council of Philadelphia once again in bringing such important speakers and topics to Philadelphia for our students, our faculty, our staff, and as well as the Council's audience members. We're excited to have Miss Arianna Huffington joining us this evening. It's the first time I've seen her, not on Bill Maher's show. Ms. Huffington is Chair, President, and Editor-in-Chief of the Huffington Post Media Group, as well as a nationally syndicated columnist, author of 14 books, and one of the world's most influential women. In May 2005, she launched the Huffington Post, a news and blog site that quickly became one of the most widely read, linked to, and frequently cited media brands on the internet. In 2012, the site won a Pulitzer Prize for national reporting. She has been named to Time magazine's list of the world's 100 most influential people and Forbes' most powerful women list. Tonight, she is here to make an impassioned and compelling case for redefining what it means to be successful. I told our students to take good notes tonight. Her 14th book, Thrive, the third metric to redefining success and creating a life of well-being, wisdom, and wonder, which everyone will receive a copy of on their way out, was published by Crown in March 2014 and debuted at #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. Please join me in welcoming Miss Arianna Huffington.
Thank you so much for the introduction, and what a spectacular place to be speaking at. It looks really, really magnificent. And for those of you who have not heard me before, this accent is for real. It has been the bane of my existence. I can assure you I tried to change it multiple times with no success. And I only relaxed about it when I met Henry Kissinger. And he said to me, in American public life, you can never overestimate the advantages of complete and total incomprehensibility. So, as you said, I really do want to make a compelling and definitely impassioned case for redefining success and also for ending this collective delusion that we are living under, that burnout is the way to succeed. Because I really feel, as you are reading my biography, that we should add a line, you know, when it says Arianna Huffington launched the Huffington Post on May 9th, 2005, and on April 8th, 2007, she collapsed from exhaustion, sleep deprivation, and burnout. I really think my biography should include that. In fact, I'm going to do that, because the truth is that it is not necessary, contrary to what we think, to collapse in order to succeed. And now, and the reason I wrote Thrive is because after my collapse, I started reading the science, all the latest scientific findings, and realized that we are at this amazing moment in history when our scientific findings are corroborating ancient wisdom about the importance of renewal, sleep, meditation, prayer, whatever it is that you do to recharge and also put everything in perspective. And we are in the middle of a perfect storm, because on the one hand, we have all these new scientific findings. On the other hand, the price we are paying for this collective delusion is escalating. Right now, you know, 3/4 of our healthcare costs are for preventable stress-related diseases. Just pause and think of that. Like 25% of disease, there's nothing we can do about. But 75% is in our hands. And as I've been traveling around the world talking about Thrive, I cannot tell you the numbers of people who come up to me and talk to me about their moment of collapse. It's mostly women, but I don't think that's because it's mostly women to whom it happens. I think women are more likely to be transparent about it. And these are all people at different ages. You know, some of them are people at the top of their career, others are students. And in the paperback that you're going to receive that just came out, I have a new preface in which I quote some of these stories that I've learned as I've been traveling around the world. And it doesn't have to be that way. I have 2 daughters who just both recently graduated from college, and I saw what's happening in colleges. You know, the amount of stress that drives students to binge drinking to the point of blacking out, which I don't see the fun of that. You know, drugs, both illegal and prescription drugs. I mean, we're having an epidemic of stress and depression. Depression is up 400% since the 1980s. So in the middle of this perfect storm of both new scientific findings and the recognition of the escalating cost, a lot of good things are happening. And I chronicle them all in the book. A lot of them are happening in businesses, which is fascinating. 35% of American businesses now have introduced some form of stress reduction program. And that's not because they're benevolent employers, it's because they see the impact on the bottom line. Okay, maybe some of them are benevolent employers, but my point is that you don't even have to be benevolent anymore. Mark Bertolini, the CEO of Aetna, the third largest health insurance company in America, not only brought all these stress reduction practices, yoga, meditation, etc., into Aetna, but then brought Duke University to study the impact. And they found a 7% reduction in healthcare costs and a 69-minute-a-week improvement in productivity. So what is interesting at the personal level is that because of our growing addiction to technology and the fact that we don't seem to be able to separate ourselves from our devices, we now take better care of our smartphones than we take care of ourselves. I'm sure everybody here knows approximately how much battery remains in your phone right now. And if the battery is under 13%, you begin to get worried and look around for a recharging shrine, lest anything would happen to your precious phone. But if somebody had asked me the morning of my collapse, how are you, Arianna, I would have said fine. Because being tired has become the new normal. In fact, if you go to Google right now and you type, why am I, you know how Google autocompletes? The most common autocomplete is, why am I so tired? And the second most common autocomplete is, why am I always tired? So we're dealing with an epidemic. And in my effort to redefine success, I saw that, first of all, we have shrunken the definition of success down to two metrics, money and power, which is like trying to sit on a two-legged stool. And the third metric that is missing is, for me, absolutely essential, and it consists of 4 pillars. The first is well-being, and we talked a little bit about the health impact of how we live. The second is wisdom. The decisions we make are very affected by how connected we are with our own inner center of wisdom and intuition. Wonder, our capacity to wonder and to notice beautiful things, which if we're constantly multitasking, we fail to do. I mean, I live in Soho in New York, and when I stopped walking and being on the phone or walking and texting, I started noticing things that I had completely missed. Like a building near my apartment, and I said to a friend, this is the most gorgeous building. I said, when did it go up? And she said, 1890. And the fourth pillar is giving. So if you put all that together, lives become so much more meaningful and so much more joyful. And the question I've gotten more often than any other on my travels for Thrive is, yes, okay, I get it. I understand that my life would be better if I did these things, but how do I go from knowing what to do to actually doing it? And I took the challenge on, and I just completed taping a 6-week e-course with Oprah, which is going live on May 3rd, and some of you took some of the little cards when I was signing books. And those who didn't can find out about it if you go to oprah.com/thrive. And it was fascinating to take 12 steps that I think is what we need to go from merely surviving or succeeding in that narrow sense to thriving. And each week we delve into 2 steps. And the first week, the 2 steps are sleep and meditation. And every week I have a guest teacher. And the first week, the guest teacher is Kobe Bryant. And I picked Kobe Bryant because I wanted to demonstrate that when Kobe discovered the power of sleep and meditation, as he says on the course, it made him better at everything he was doing. It wasn't like a trade-off between what he wanted to excel in and taking care of himself. The better care he took of himself, the better he was at what he wanted to do. And he's a fantastic teacher. He's amazing. Another teacher is David Gilboa, who is actually the co-founder and co-CEO of Warby Parker, which was created here. And as you know, for every pair of glasses you buy, they donate one to somebody in need. And David talks in the course about how do you establish your priorities. Because one of the problems with our lives is that we try to cram too much in, and in the process we are suffering from what is known as time famine, and we end up living our lives breathlessly, always running out of time. So David takes you through a life audit where you identify all the projects that you have, some that you want to have, some that you have to have, and then decide what are you really going to invest time and energy in, and what can you just take off the list. I did that, and it was fantastic. I came to a major realization, which is that you can actually complete a project by dropping it. So I, for example, have always wanted to become a good skier. I'm a lousy skier, and my daughters love to ski. But I realized during this life audit that in fact I was never going to invest the time and energy necessary to become a good skier. So instead of keeping that project there in my head, draining energy, I just declared skiing done. So now when I go skiing with my daughters, I sit by the fire, I drink hot chocolate, read a good book, and I have absolutely no inkling of ever tackling skiing. Or frankly, another thing that I thought one day would be nice to know was how to cook. I dropped that too. So you can go through and drop any projects you've started in your head that you are not going to put energy into, and then concentrate on the things you really are. It's incredibly liberating. This is just another of the steps. I'm just going to walk you through one more of the steps. And this is around gratitude. Because so often in life we tend to focus on what is not working rather than what is working. And every life is a mixture. You know, however blessed things may look from the outside, there is nobody who doesn't have adversity or challenges to deal with. So in the course, we walk through daily gratitude lists. And I talk, actually, the teacher here, believe it or not, is my own daughter, Christina, because of her own experience that she was willing to talk publicly about, which I was very grateful for. When she was in her last year at Yale, she got involved in drugs. And I got the call, you know, every mother dreads, you know, Mommy, I can't breathe. And I had this drive from New York to New Haven to pick her up from the emergency room. She's been sober now for 3 years. But in the course of her recovery, the thing that has helped her more than anything was focusing on gratitude. And so she and 3 friends, every night, without fail, do a gratitude list and share it with each other. And that's an important element throughout the course. We create like a little what we call Thrive Tribe, you know, a support group. Because even if you have one person who is on the journey with you, it makes it much easier to kind of encourage each other. If, for example, you are tempted to binge watch House of Cards instead of going to sleep, you can call your friend, your support buddy, your sponsor, whatever you want to call them, and they can talk you down. They can tell you to close your laptop and go to sleep or you'll regret it in the morning. So let me wrap up so that we can move to our question time. I really believe that when we remember that, as the Onion headline put it, death rate holds steady at 100%, it concentrates our mind wonderfully. Because we have at most 30,000, well, not at most, I mean, on average, if we're lucky, 30,000 days to play the game of life. And how we play it depends on what we value. And if you've been to a friend's memorial recently, you realize that our eulogies have very little to do with our LinkedIn profiles. You know, have you ever heard anybody eulogized with the words, you know, George was amazing, he increased market share by 1/3. So when we prioritize what we value, what becomes clear is what for me was summed up by Ian Thomas, who said every day, life will yank you by the hand and tell you this is important and this is important and this is important. You must worry about this and you must worry about that. And you must take your hand back and put it on your heart and say, no, this is important. Thank you.
So part of what we like to do in these conversations, is a little bit of devil's advocate and challenge our speakers to dig into their ideas. And I have a couple questions that are sort of in that spirit. So what you've said obviously resonates with this audience and resonates with millions who have read the book and heard you speak about it. But there is a possibility of looking at it and saying, and I'm going to put this in a kind of provocative way deliberately, saying you are describing rich people's problems. If you're a single parent, minimum wage, your definition of well-being is a better paycheck, or could be a better paycheck, more material success. If you are the citizen of a much poorer country, even more basic necessities of life, food and shelter, medicine, might be the definition of thriving. So my question for you is, are the prescriptions that you advocate, do you really think that they apply across class lines?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, the more challenging your life is, you know, the more struggles you are facing, whether it's putting food on the table, losing your job, being, as you said, a single mom on a minimum wage, the more important it is, as they say on airplanes, to put your own oxygen mask first. Because that determines your resilience. And I quote studies in the book, including, I'll just mention one, the University of Chicago did a study when the Bell Company in Illinois downsized. It was one of the biggest downsizings in history at the time. They fired 50% of their employee base. And the university followed them all. And 2/3 fell apart. You know, they became alcoholics, they became depressed, they got divorced. 1/3 went on to thrive. They got better jobs. They started their own businesses. Now, the same bad thing happened to all of them. But how they responded to it was dramatically different. We all have incredible resources in us. You know, sometimes we hear people saying, you know, this tragedy brought the best out in them, or it brought parts of themselves out they didn't know they had. So the harder times are, the more we need to tap into these resources that we all have, but that so often we're completely disconnected from. And I say that to especially young people who are starting out, like my daughters, and they often think, well, they have to burn out, they have to exhaust themselves in order to succeed. And the truth is that, in fact, the more they take care of themselves, the more creative and productive they're going to be. And that's what's becoming more and more important in companies. I know you're having Laszlo. You had Laszlo on here.
This Friday. Yeah.
This Friday? Well, I was on Morning Joe with him yesterday. And we were talking about how what you value in terms of hiring more than anything is creativity and productivity. And creativity is the first thing that's killed when you're exhausted. Just look at, you can look back at any day of your life. If I'm burnt out, I can still do transactional things. I can answer emails, I can take a sort of mundane meeting, but don't ask me to be creative, and don't ask me to do anything important. And I quote Bill Clinton in the book, who said, the most important mistakes I made, he said, I made when I was tired. Now, he did not specify what mistakes. But we can all identify.
So the book, for many people, has a kind of almost a sort of spiritual resonance, and people are impressed by your offer of a path towards a kind of a deeper meaning in life than the conventional definition of success. Question is, how does the path that you offer differ from, and is it in any way antagonistic to what for billions of people in the world is the traditional path towards meaning, namely religion? So, in other words, is the path that you offer a kind of alternative spirituality, or do you think it's consistent with principles of faith?
Oh, entirely consistent. There's nothing alternative about it. In fact, when we talk about meditation, you can substitute the word prayer. It's the same thing. In everybody's life, you choose the way to connect with something deeper, more essential. I'm completely comfortable with God. The word God. I use it often. If people are not comfortable with it, they can connect with the center in them. Whatever they want to call it doesn't matter, because it's so much bigger than our own mental expressions that anything we say anyway is only an approximation. So it doesn't really matter exactly what we say. But I love what William Gladstone said, although some are disputing if he said it, but even if it's apocryphal, I love it, when he was Prime Minister of England. And he said, I pray every day for 1 hour, except when I'm very busy, when I pray for 2. And that's very profound, because the busier we are, the more we need that time to reconnect with ourselves. And the other thing that I love is the whole metaphor of creation. Because if you think of it, it's an amazing metaphor. That's why I love the Shabbat. You don't have to be Jewish to appreciate the fact that God worked terribly hard for 6 days, created heaven and earth, which is a pretty awesome undertaking. And then on the 7th day, he took the whole day off. Don't you think he was trying to give us a message? Clearly, he's omnipresent, omnipowerful. He didn't take a day off for himself. He didn't have to. He took it for us, but we have forgotten that. And I spoke at the Salesforce conference in San Francisco recently, and they were very proudly presenting a new cloud computing system that has 99.9% uptime. And I said in my speech, human beings were not designed to have 99.9% uptime. And it's not because God was not as smart as Mark Benioff, who is the CEO of Salesforce. It's just because downtime is not a bug, it's a feature. So that's the kind of change we need to make in our own thinking. And it's not easy, because I went back and read what people were saying during the dawn of the Industrial Revolution. And that's when all these illusions were created. Thomas Edison is just railing against sleep. Consider it's the weakness. people were celebrating the ability to just stay up at all hours. And now we have 2,580 sleep centers in universities and medical centers dealing with the epidemic of sleep deprivation, insomnia, apnea, the fact that people can't go to sleep without, in many cases, without medicating themselves every night. I'm not talking occasionally, but every night.
I'm going to ask one last question. I'd like to ask any of you who have questions to please come to the microphones in either aisle. We'll have time to take a few of those while I pose this to Arianna. Are there public policy implications to the book? Are there laws and policies of government that would help people follow the path you've laid out?
Yes, there are public policy implications, there are business and corporate implications, and there are individual implications. And I start in the book with the individual because that's the only thing we're in complete control of. Now, those of us who are in control of businesses have a huge responsibility. And I know at the Huffington Post, I have introduced a lot of these things into our business. We have 2 nap rooms, for example, and I encourage people, if they are tired in the middle of the afternoon, to go take a nap. We have weekly meditation, yoga, and breathing classes. We have healthy, free snacks everywhere. And most important, we have an email policy that makes it clear that when you finish your work, you are not expected to be on email. And for me, that is incredibly important because it's called predictable time off. You want to be able to be with your family, your children, and not think that you have to keep looking at your smartphone because your boss may expect you to respond to an email. And we're just about to introduce a policy that I'm really excited about. We're working with Gmail now to make it happen, that when people go on vacation, they can opt in to have their emails intercepted. And instead of getting a response that says, Jane is out of office, which is useless, because 5 minutes later you get a response from Jane. Because once we see the email, we cannot stop ourselves. So the emails are intercepted, and instead the sender gets an email that says, Jane is on vacation. She will not see this email. If it is urgent, reach out to Mary. If it is not, re-email her in 2 weeks. It is unbelievable. You know who introduced it first? Daimler in Germany. Not exactly a new agey, flaky country. And it was so effective, and people came back from vacation so recharged that a lot of other companies are now introducing it. And at first, people are like aghast at the idea that their emails will be deleted, because that's what happens. But then people who are trying it are seeing that, in fact, they only get like 1/3 of their emails when they return, because other things are handled by delegating or just in the natural course of life, or then they deal with them when they return.
Thank you. Questions from the audience? Anybody want to join this conversation? Come on up.
And tell us who you are and what you do, and if you want, how many hours sleep you get.
That's an embarrassing question. I get on average 5 to 6 hours of sleep a night.
Not good, not good.
I'm not proud of that. Good evening, Ms. Huffington. It's not something you say every day. And my name is Anthony Williams. I'm a senior at Bodine High School. And my question for you is, there's this quote that's my favorite of yours. I do not try to dance better than anyone else. I only try to dance better than myself. And I think that it's interesting when we talk about the extrinsic motivators and intrinsic motivators. So the extrinsic is more, being motivated by money and the thrill of competition. And it has a negative effect on production, as you said, and it kills creativity. Whereas the intrinsic motivators, such as improving yourself, is what really empowers and promotes under productivity. And I wanted to ask you if that was your meaning of the quote. That's how I interpreted it.
That's a great interpretation. It was actually a quote I have in the book, and it's by Michael Baryshnikov, who actually dances as opposed to me. But the principle of it is to not look at your life constantly as a competition, comparing yourself to someone else, because this is like living your life looking over your shoulder all the time. And that each one of us is completely unique. And when we live our lives from that authentic place of our own uniqueness, rather than comparing ourselves with someone else or trying to be like someone else, everything is very different. I was doing Super Soul Sunday with Oprah, and she told me the story of how, for the beginning of her career, she was trying to be like Barbara Walters. And she was trying to speak like Barbara Walters and have Barbara Walters' mannerisms, and nothing much was happening in her career. And then one day, something happened, and she was reading the news, and she just became herself, and she spoke like herself, and people just kind of, hey, this woman has an amazing personality. And that's true of many of us. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll come over here.
Hey, good evening. I was curious to know what you think we can do on a broad scope to encourage companies to support their employees in meditating for 10 or 15 minutes every day.
So, you know, as I said, there are 35% of companies doing things like that. And we are now in this moment of transition when at least companies are thinking of all these things. And these are no longer alien concepts, because they have moved from the pages of the Yoga Journal or spiritual literature to Forbes, Wall Street Journal, and The Economist. And every business school now has some kind of discussion around these concepts. At Harvard, for example, Bill George, who is still on the board of Goldman Sachs, teaches a course on leadership that includes all these concepts and how they make you a better leader. So I think the shift is happening. I hope that by having this conversation, we can accelerate it.
We're going to have time for two more. We'll take one on each side. Please.
And also, you know, I gave a lot of people my business cards, so that if you have any questions that I haven't answered here, or if you want to write about these things, please email me. Those who didn't take a card, it's Arianna@HuffingtonPost.com. And I love inviting people to share their own stories on any of these issues, because that's the way we kind of learn from each other.
Hi, my name is Karima Dixon, and I'm a senior at William W. Bowdoin High School, too. So actually, it is in motion. So we actually, at our school, have once-a-week meditation every Tuesday. But my question is it easier said than done? So, like, during our Tuesday sessions of meditation, we meditate for about an hour, and my classmates are totally into it, but I'm sitting there with a blank face, thinking about everything else I have to do throughout the day. So my question is, it seems like in our society, you have to put in all the work. Like, I need to do all these research papers now so that later in life I can meditate. But is it easier said than done now?
That's a great question. Actually, if you start on the days when you don't do your school meditation with 5 minutes, I have a 5-minute meditation in the book. It doesn't have to be an hour. And it doesn't have to be any particular way. I think what is important is to realize that thoughts are going to come, and you're going to go through your to-do list, and that's totally fine. The important thing is that you learn to reconnect with that place in yourself. And what is interesting now is that there are even an amazing number of apps, ironically, that can help you disconnect from technology and learn to meditate. And I have 2 appendices. I'm so glad you're all getting a book, because I have 2 appendices in the book. One is of meditation apps. My favorite is Headspace, I have to say. And the other is apps that can put all your incoming messages on hold so that you can just concentrate and just do your paper or your memo or whatever it is you're doing. And my favorite is Antisocial. It's called Antisocial.
Last question over here.
In terms of understanding where you are in your life right now, how do you account for people like single mothers or unemployed students or anyone that doesn't really have the time to take a day off or take an hour, or if they do, they'll even be even further behind their life than they are now? How do you account, or how do you make up for, are they less successful than you are right now in your life when you are able to meditate? How do you make up for that?
Well, in fact, I have a lot of evidence in the book about how they've taken, let's say, meditation into violent schools around the country, and it has helped reduce violence. And I write a story in the book about a friend of mine who lost her job during the financial collapse. And she was devastated because she had worked all her life. She could not imagine, being out of work. And I said to her, while you're looking for another job, why don't you go and volunteer at this place that I'm on the board of in South Central LA called a place called Home for At-Risk Children? At first, she looked at me aghast, like I had lost all sense of empathy. But she did it. And it just changed her whole perspective about what was happening in her life. And it made it easier for her to feel empowered and to get another job instead of wallowing in self-pity. And one of the things that made that transition was that they were doing a forgiveness circle, which they do every night at the place called Home. And she forgave her daughter for forgetting her birthday. And the girl next to her forgave her father for killing her mother. And it suddenly puts your life in perspective. And it just puts our problems in perspective. So this is not, to go back to your first question, for people who've solved their problems and are just dealing with problems of having too many demands on their time. This is for people wherever they are, at whatever stage in their lives. And I even have quotes from people from concentration camps, because there can be no more extreme situation we can imagine. And yet Viktor Frankl wrote about how even in the middle of this horrific situation, there were people who were able to connect with something deeper, something more powerful in themselves. And that's really what we're talking about. And it's not at all a function of external circumstances.
We're going to take a short break, 15 minutes. Please stick around for the panel discussion, Young Women Business Leaders, and we'll start in 15 minutes. In the meantime, thank you very much, Arianna.
Thank you.